Well, hello and welcome to the Waking Up Spiritually podcast. We're so thrilled to have you here. I'm Wendy Rose Williams, and I'm a past life energy healer, and I help people release physical and emotional pain, as well as anxiety and depression, and that stuck energy that's just keeping you in second gear when you'd like to be able to really, really enjoy your life, feel happy and healthy, and that your life has a beautiful purpose. So we're thrilled to have you here. And my website is wendyrosewilliams.com. And I'd like to introduce my co-host, who's going to tell you a little bit about himself, and then he's going to introduce a very special experiencer guest that we have with us today. And you need to buckle up your seatbelts for an unusual, wonderful, amazing conversation. So, Gregg, please tell our listeners who you are.
I'm Gregg Kirk. You can come to my website, which is Gregg, Gregg, Kirk, Kirk.com. I'm an energy worker. I do in-person sessions. I do remote sessions. I run an online group healing circle every Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. East Coast time. This Sunday, however, I'll be hosting a fire circle in Connecticut for the autumnal equinox. So those in the New York metro area, please go to my website, click the events link, and to see if you might want to join us in an event of toning and singing and making joyful noises with singing bowls and things like that, chimes. It's a wonderful experience, healing experience, and there's a lot of fraternity that goes on, because it just much like the group that Wendy and I created here, Waking Up Spiritually, we've got a lot of people who are having their own experiences. They don't have other people to talk to about it. So anyway, so again, come to my website, gregkirk.com. Today, actually, Wendy, I'm going to pull the deck up so we can.
While Gregg is doing that, what he's doing is bringing up a PowerPoint deck. So if you're listening to the podcast, fantastic. If you would like to see the podcast, you can visit our website, which is wakingupspiritually.com. And we go live in YouTube, and then we also share this on the podcast app. So whatever's most convenient for you.
So today we are interviewing a man named Tony Rodrigues. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Tony is a secret space program experiencer and the author of 3 books. One of them is Ceres, Colony Cavalier. Its sequel is Project Star Maker. And he's also written a book called Beyond Sight, The Hidden History of Remote Viewing and Psychoenergetic. He hosts weekly meetups through his self-created group Talks with Tony, which is a Patreon group, which is focused on disclosure, consciousness expansion, and remote viewing. He has created a memory recall course for others who suspect they may have been involved in similar groups and remote viewing classes based on his experiences in covert programs. So I'm going to knock this down, and we are going to invite our special guest today. Actually, let me stop the sharing, and here we go. Let's admit our special guest, and hopefully he's got his coffee and he's ready to go. Okay, Tony, if you're there.
So Tony will join us in a moment. So Gregg, why don't you start setting the stage, and Tony will come right on in.
Yes, let me just real quick. So yes, Tony. Okay, here we go. Hey, Tony.
Good morning, Tony. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm great to be here.
I didn't know, but when you're in the waiting room, can you hear anything we're saying?
I was out of the room.
Oh,
but yes. To answer your question, yes, but I wasn't listening.
Okay.
I was far away. I was poured another coffee. It's morning time for me.
Right. No worries. Okay. Well, Tony, we just introduced you, and we wanted to kind of set the stage for some of the things you're going to talk about, your own experiences. But I want to hearken all the way back to the 1960s. The idea, and also the idea is this: we were all talking privately before the broadcast, that there seems to be 2 groups of people. There's the group that Waking Up Spiritually tends to focus on, which is the people who have experienced interactions with angelic beings, with higher ascended masters, even interactions with Jesus or the archangels. But also other maybe possible interdimensional beings. And then you've got a second group of people who have had interactions with interdimensional beings, but also ETs, or they're close encounters of the fifth kind, where they've actually been either abducted or they've had interactions with a range of different species of ETs. And these two groups, never the twain shall meet usually. So, it's kind of like the people in the ET groups look at the spiritual experiencers as, oh, they're religious wackadoos, or vice versa. The people in the spiritual groups will look at the ET people and say, oh, they're interacting with aliens. Or they're interacting with demons. There's no such things as aliens. These have been written about in the Bible. They're negative beings, So you're one of the first people that I saw, back, I think in 2016, 2017, give a 3-part interview with Dr. Michael Salla. And what, really struck me about your story was you got a 3-hour story. So it's not easy to describe, but basically you've had interactions with a range of aliens, and it's turned into a spiritual awakening for you, which is right in the pocket of what I want to talk about today, because I think that's amazing. I would like to bridge the two groups, at least start with the interview. And so let's go all the way back. For the people who are spiritually inclined and not less so, ET inclined, people have been talking about, and right now we've got this climate of, the US military is just now recognizing that the military has videos of, ETs, the Tic Tac video, for instance, after 50 years of saying they don't exist, more or less. But, hearkening all the way back, there's a really compelling story that's on Netflix called Walking with the Tall Whites. It's a documentary. It focuses on the experience from Charles James Hall, who was a Vietnam War decorated vet. He got transferred to Nellis Air Force Base in the Nevada desert in 1964. And he, in detail describes his interactions with a group of aliens called the Tall Whites. And they were a specific type of group that had the ability to put the entire Air Force Base into a hypnotic state. When they didn't do that, the interactions with the people was terror. They were afraid of these beings. It was almost like they couldn't control themselves. But the whole point of this seems to be that the US military was working with these aliens to providing a labor force, which was the humans, and the agreement was they were repairing their craft, and in return, the US military was getting technology. So this is a fascinating idea that, it's, first of all, it blows the lid off of, are there aliens in these UFOs? And when will they visit us? Well, they've been visiting us, and we're doing business with them, starting, probably decades before that. But this is, hard, cold evidence starting in the 1960s. 20 years later, we've got Bob Lazar, doing a famous interview with George Knapp, talking about the reason we know about Area 51 today is because, and Groom Lake and S4, is because Bob Lazar came forward and said, listen, we've got alien craft, that we're retro engineering right now. One of the craft that we have came from an archaeological dig from thousands of years ago. Boom, another mind blower. And they're basically retro engineering. And he was a part of the propulsion group, and he talks about in detail. A lot of his stories can very much be corroborated. And then around the same period of time, we've got the Law of One books with Don Elkins, Jim McCarty, and Carla Rucker. And these people this is kind of the bridge between spirituality and ET. So Don Elkins is an original ufologist, and he asks these beings that they're channeling, what is the origin of the craft that we see, that we call UFOs? And the Ra beings say the origin, where they're created, is on Earth. And this blew his mind so much. Don Elkins says, I don't believe you. And of course, the Ra beings, they don't care. They're like, that's, of no consequence to us. Your belief is not required. We're telling you the truth. So this is just up to 1985. I know you want to comment about some of these things, Tony. So let me just stop right there.
All of them.
Yeah, please.
So really good stuff. So, okay, the spirituality thing, I think this is let's get the big one. Let's address that. So people that see a difference between extraterrestrials and spirituality seem to be very limited in what they believe. So the idea that the earth is the only place with life, and that spirit, you would get an angel that interacts only with humans and doesn't care about the lion or the bear in the woods, it also doesn't make sense. So when we look, I always say that nature extends beyond the sky. So I didn't invent this. I got this from an astronomy place, from the the Institute of Astronomy for the University of Hawaii. They always say that nature extends beyond the sky. It's nature. When you go into space, space is not a dome. It's not a fake thing. You can use parallax and telescopes, and it's undisputable. Space is out there, and it's very active, and there's a lot going on. There are another bunch of other things about astronomy that are also undisputable, that they have the ability to see atmospheres on exoplanets, and it's been stifled. So big money has come in and stopped telescopes from being built that have the ability to detect life on other worlds, and this is absolutely provable. So there is a cover-up, and we've known there's a cover-up because like you said, they've come out with UAP disclosure about these craft that can go very fast. These craft, the physics behind a craft that can go underwater and then into space in a few minutes and then make a right turn at 40,000 miles an hour, also lends that you could make it to all of the bodies in our solar system very quickly, or at least in a way that would make them accessible, right? So that's already proved. We're talking about what's proven. And when you think about nature, and a spirit, a God, a creator God. I believe in the creator of the universe as a God. What you want to call it, God, whatever. I believe the universe is created by a divine creator. So that's my personal belief. You also can see the rules of the universe in nature that are below us. So humans operate in our own margin of rules that we have. We have the thing we believe we have justice or equality. We believe we have security and all these things. But in reality, nature doesn't work that way. Nature is a machine. The Buddhists teach that, because after what happened to me when I was a young man, when I was like 19, I always had memories of being abducted by a gray in my room. I always had memories of sitting in rooms with ETs and having conversations. The first 30 minutes of my experience of my book series, Colony Camp, the first 30 minutes of that experience didn't get erased. The rest of the memories got erased and came out when I was in my early 40s. So I read the Bible. I thought, there's got to be, if the Bible is true, there's got to be something in here about ETs. They got to tell me that there's a gray ET somewhere. And there really wasn't at first, because I wasn't looking at it with the benefit of my memories, of all my memories. And so I read the Bible, I read the Quran, I read the Torah, I read there's even a satanic book. Know Thy Enemy was my thing. I read everything. I read the Chan Buddhist. There's quite a bit of Buddhist literature, or Taoism. I read from 19 till 25, I read every religious text I could get my hands on. And the purpose was to make sense of what I remembered. Somebody had to know this. Somebody had to know that the universe has other life forms that are smarter than us, right? And so they talk about angels and these things. The book of Ezekiel, really, if you look at it, is an ET abduction experience. So it wasn't God or Jesus that took Ezekiel, it was angels.
Mm-hmm.
And the definition of angel, somebody that lives in the sky, right? Lives in the heavens, somebody from the heavens.
Right.
So also a definition of an ET. So when we're talking about spirituality and extraterrestrial, it's the same thing. There is no difference.
Right.
It's just so people are reflecting on what they personally witnessed.
Right.
So some people are being contacted by very advanced, I want to say species, but that's people.
Yeah. Right.
If it's a bucket of goo and it can speak 150,000 words, it's a person.
Right.
Or if it's a squirrel. The other thing is, from a squirrel's perspective, in the jungle, if you're a squirrel and you're walking through a jungle or a forest, you may come across a bobcat. You may come across a person, a human being, a hiker that will go, "Oh, honey, here's some, I have some trail mix," and feed you exactly the most delicious thing you ever had in your life. And they'll continue about their way, and you had an interaction. You go, "Man, there's beautiful people. God gave me this trail mix that was the best thing I ever had, but it was just somebody naturally walking by. Or you may come in contact with another squirrel, or you know what I'm saying, like a bigger animal that is competing with you, and it's all of a sudden it's a terrible story. So it's just nature. That's what I mean. It's just the universe is a forest of species that extends, and when we get to a certain level, so certain species have the ability to access the forest. Like, you know, an ant doesn't see the forest. It doesn't have the ability to travel miles and miles. Ants don't have that ability. So they're locked in their area. So that's what humans are currently. Us at Earth, we're the bulk of us, right? So the militaries can go. Some animals, birds, can travel around the world naturally, right? And so we have that same dynamic, and they interact with different species. And that's the nature extends beyond the sky. And it was the design from the original creator of the universe, in my opinion. That's what I believe. And so when you talk about spirituality, they're demons. Everything is a demon. That's not the truth. Astronomy is conclusive, and everybody should do some astronomy. If they have these big soul searching questions, you're going to argue with somebody if the world's flat or if they're aliens or demons. You really need to go and join an astronomy club and acquire that knowledge of the stars. I thought everybody was amazed by the stars at night growing up. I thought that was something that just fired your mind, that you look up and you see all these other suns that probably have all these other planets, that probably have all these other people and other things around them. Like when you look at the sky on a clear night, I mean, it's obvious that we live in this, you know what I mean? It's obvious to us. We have one star next to us that's the sun that's up. So a general knowledge of basic astronomy. Number one, it's a great date too. It's far more romantic than taking her to a movie. It's taking her to the astronomy club, to the observatory or the planetarium, and looking through a telescope, and then grabbing dinner. Believe me, that's a great date. Try it. But that rudimentary knowledge of astronomy, of things called parallax, you can't have a flat earth with parallax. It's impossible. And so just basically not understanding these basic things opens the door to that. And if you're very religious and you think that everything up there is demons, then, you know, knowledge of the number of worlds and the number of stars. When they show us a picture of a galaxy far away, when you see a picture and you see little stars in it, those aren't individual stars. Those are clumps of hundreds of thousands of stars in each dot. So that's the amount of worlds we have, and we have billions of galaxies.
Right.
Like that. So the idea that everything outside of us is a demon is just preposterous.
Well,
but I mean, just the thinking on those terms really lets you understand, get into the head of the creator as well.
Right. Well, you know, and we were talking earlier, we were talking about different species of ETs, because some people, they can make the mental leap of, oh, there's extraterrestrials, and I've seen what grays look like, and they think that's all there is to it, and that they might
just
be bad. Yeah, just grays. That's it.
There's only grays up there. It's just us, and then there's grays.
But it's your whole squirrel analogy. Not only are there bobcats, there's all kinds of species.
Termites and birds and parrots.
And it's what we were talking about earlier. If you were on another planet and you were getting ready to travel to Earth, and your ET brother or sister said, "Hey, you know, what do you think you're going to meet? What type of people are the Earthlings? Are they good or are they bad?"
You know, it depends on where you land.
Right, exactly. So, you know, it's the same thing with extraterrestrials, you know, the other species, the thousands of species. And anyway, so I want to get to your story now. So with this as a context, you know, so we live in a world where we're not, you know, we don't live in a cul-de-sac here, you know, where we're the only people on the block. We are intergalactic beings, like you said. We've had visitors here for thousands of years, since the Earth, you know, began, and there's many who say that we are brothers and sisters with some, we are hybrids, or you know, whatever. And I don't want to go down too far a rabbit hole in that, but that's another possibility. And then but the interactions have been going on, and the ones that I was trying to hang my hat on were, you know, it definitely started in the 60s, as you know, you can go view a video about it, and then Dr. Stephen Greer came out in 2001 and gave this big, you know, National Press Club conference of including military whistleblowers coming out and saying, yeah, we've been interacting with aliens. So anyway, but with that in mind, you're a young kid in the United States, and you're 10 years old. I was it in the 80s? When did you have your experience?
I was abducted April 15th, 1982. I was able to go through the weather records and my school, my elementary school calendar, and did those the exact day, because the Easter break was the week before, the science fair was on Wednesday, and I was taken Thursday.
Yep. Okay. So what happened to you?
So just real quick, yeah.
Right. 5 minutes or less.
So some of this might be disturbing. You know, it's very disturbing what happened to me, and I often look for evidence that would prove me wrong. And usually the evidence pans out in the other direction. I've actually uncovered a great deal of supporting evidence, supporting and proving what I'm about to say. I went to school in southern Michigan, and I was in Ypsilanti, Michigan, where I grew up on an old farmhouse. And I went to school with a boy who I was in the talented and gifted program, the top 5% of the school. We met on Wednesdays in the library, and it was advanced learning techniques like memory and cataloging and things. And there was a boy in there from the other part of the school that said that we didn't get along. He said, "My dad's an Illuminati. What's your dad do?" That was the famous words he said to me. We did not like each other. I was jealous of him being smart. I wanted to be the smartest kid in the class, and I wasn't. But he pointed me out to his dad, and I picked on him. And we had a rivalry, a very real rivalry for those months. And then in April of that year, we had the science fair, and his dad, who was apparently had a lot of credentials. He was highly educated. So he came in and volunteered to help out and be a judge for the science fair. When I walked by the cafeteria, we set up our exhibits Wednesday morning. When I walked by them, he said, "Dad, that's that boy I told you about." So they had a conversation, and the following night, on Thursday night, April 15th, I always get them mixed, 15th or 16th. I'm pretty sure it's April 15th, 1982. The following night, I woke up with a gray extraterrestrial in my room, and several other small, shorter, stocky reptilians walked in from at the end of my bed and paralyzed me. And it's a longer story than that. You've seen it. And carried me out. There was a flash of light, and I lost consciousness, and I woke up in a laboratory or somewhere. I woke up in a base or somewhere else on a stainless steel table with medical equipment around me, naked, and with a gray ET, a few gray ETs, a reptilian ET, and a tall white did come in and just visit for a minute and leave. And they were doing tests, medical tests on me. So I was taken and lived what there's a phenomenon many people have called a 20 and back. And I was taken and lived for 20 years. So through an exotic technology of either time travel, cloning, consciousness moving, the exotic technology, it was described through William Tompkins' account and selected by extraterrestrials. William Tompkins worked on the Apollo program and said that there was a government program that could reverse age people. But I lived for 20 years in these programs, in first Black Op programs on the Earth. I was in a advanced remote viewing and research, and then in drug trafficking, and through a few programs on Earth. And then I was sold off. That was the verbiage. I was sold off to the military, to the secret space program, where I was taken to the backside of the moon, trained to be a support soldier, and shipped off to Mars, and was in a experimental program on Mars. And then that was canceled, and I was retrained to be ship maintenance, sold to the Ceres Colony Corporation. A Ceres is a small dwarf planet in between Mars and the asteroid belt. It's spelled Ceres. And they're inside the planet. On the inside of it were about 250,000 people that were Europeans that broke away. And after World War II, so they were the Deutsch culture, or the Germans. They did not identify as Nazis. So they're from that culture, though, that broke away and lived there amongst other extraterrestrial races. And I lived there. I did ship maintenance for 8 years. And I did, then I was promoted. I was a cargo engineer on a ship that did interstellar trade missions throughout the galaxy and to nearby galaxies. And at the end of it, they put me back. I woke up the next morning. I woke up April 16th, 1982, back in my 10-year-old body. I felt like I had been gone for 20 years. I was a different person. I was attracted to adult women for some reason at 10 years old. And because I'd already been 30 years old the day before. and went on about my life. I went to school the next day. I couldn't find the bathroom. I had, the teacher called, my mom concerned. I asked to go to not a big school either, not a school where you could forget your way. But for me, this passage of time I had the feeling of the passage of time. And I lived my life. I lived, and I was no longer the top 5% of the school afterwards. My emotional and mental state was greatly diminished after what happened to me. And later on in my 40s, I got an MRI scan. I got a medical checkup, and she said, let's just be safe and give you a scan while you're here, your first time with me, my new doctor. And about 10 days later, I stumbled upon the exopolitics interview with Randy Kramer, because I always had bleed through memories of times, and I thought, when could that have happened? When I had a career on a ship, I had memories that would bleed through where I was a cargo engineer on a spaceship, flying over another planet or visiting another world, and I thought,
Did
when
those
could that
come
have
to
happened?
you consciously, like in your everyday life, or was it typically in your dreams, Tony?
Both. It
That
was both. So right before you wake up, right in that theta state, is when you really can access memories. And so first thing in the morning, I would get these memories and I would go, that was weird. But it felt like a memory. So a dream, this is the quickie. In a dream that you're walking on a beach, you can't remember how you got there because you didn't get there. Your dream, you appeared on the beach. It began on the beach. You walked and you go, how did I get here? Boom, you're in another dream. These memories were different because I could remember how I got there. I could remember waking up in that morning and taking a shower and riding a train to the hangar and then getting on a ship and going. So I was like, what? And I thought, what is this? When could that have happened? It just did. And that's what I said. It really, these memories like that are what put me on that spiritual search. I thought there has to be text of this. There has to be evidence to, you know what I mean? Like if this happened to me and I knew it was real, and it was something I kept denying. Well, I didn't find it, so it must be something else.
would you
Couldn't
consider
find
it
it.
a parallel life? Did that thought enter your mind at all?
I thought I thought that I was abducted several times. I
Mhm.
thought that unbeknownst to me, I thought I remembered the original abduction and I was a kid and they put me back and then I was a little bit older. But I always remembered Seattle, I remembered the years of boredom in Seattle and always saying, it's Washington State, not DC. We would always say that when a new kid came. Why it's Washington State, not DC, because everybody goes, where am I? Where
The
are we?
other Washington.
And so that memory was pervasive. It was very, it was a torturous time. And so that memory was always there. And I thought, when did that happen? I never had. And then when I was young, when I was 11, I asked my mom to ride the Fauntleroy Ferry. Can we ride the Fauntleroy Ferry? I always wanted to when I was in San. She said, what are you talking about? Where is it? We had no knowledge of it. I'd never been to Seattle, no knowledge of it at all. My mom's a witness of this. And come to find out, lo and behold, I got my memories back. It was somewhere that was down the Fauntleroy Ferry. But anyhow, those memories bled through and it didn't make sense to me. So when I saw the Randy Kramer account on Exopolitics in 2015, May of 2015, he explained that they take people for 20 years and they can use time dilation and different technology. And the military is taking people for soldiers that work out there. And he said, they take you for 20 years and put you back. And I went, oh my God, that's what happened. And then at that very moment, I began to accept the memories rather than stuff them away because they were crazy. I thought these are crazy memories. My whole life I had them. I said, just ignore it. Get on. I need to
Because you
get
couldn't make sense of them until then.
well. And they were useless in my day to day, right? Like I was still a struggling kid, and I was very emotionally damaged. I had a family at the point so I had 3 kids and 3 dogs and a cat and a wife and every house and everything. And so my life was I was emotionally kind of healed. But when I learned about it and I thought, oh God, they took me for 20 years. And then I thought about it and I went, when I started to take the memories and then put them in order, I went, oh God, wow. And then so within hours, this was in the afternoon, the Randy Kramer video, and I got the big surge of chunks of memory came back. And the following morning, so then I quit. I was working and I went home and had dinner and I was still like pondered it all. And the next morning I thought, okay, all right, all right. And I went on Google Earth and I remembered Peru and Seattle and Inyokern. And I thought, I'm going to look there. And I just kind of looked around. I went, oh God, there it is. There's the house. So I had the memory. So, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of places in the world that neither of us have been. So have you ever been to a place called McBain, Michigan? No, right? Most people haven't. It's a very small farmer community, beautiful place. Imagine if you woke up and you had 2 years worth of memory in McBain, Michigan. You knew where the fishing hole was. You knew where the best food was, the cafeteria. You knew the road that was bumpy. You knew to walk that the rocks were soft on your feet in the mud puddle, and this mud puddle, not that one. And you had this kind of memory just happen. And then looked on Google Earth and saw, oh shit, there's a McBain, Michigan. Pardon my language, but oh, there it is. That was what happened to me in May of 15. And I went, oh, wow. And I thought, I lingered for like 3 days before I told my wife. And I took
A
her, I
lot
took
of
the phone.
integration.
I was just in shock. I was absolutely in shock. I found the house in Seattle, then I found the town in Peru, and then I found Inyokern. And I went, oh, geez, I was exactly how I remembered it. I had all these memories. And I was like, what do I do with this? And my wife, very religious woman, said if ETs are real, they'd be in that Bible. Didn't believe in it. And I said, look, I made a campfire in our yard. We had a fire pit. And I went out one night. We had some drinks, and I poured her a drink. I said, look, I need to talk to you. Please come and sit by the fire. Set my phone down and took her phone and set it away. And we went by the fire, and I just vomited all of it to her. And I said, look, I understand that something could be wrong with me. Please prove me wrong. I said, I'm going to give you a point and I want you to disprove it. I want to do, let's just tell me, you know what I mean? Like you're going to talk me into no ETs exist, and I'm going to talk you into this 20 and back happened to me. And let's do this. And for 3 nights, we did campfire and drinks every night for 3 nights. And she said, look, I can't.
Mhm.
Because
It was too much.
it's the details of your story that make it so compelling.
Right.
Yeah, you've got so many details. That's what struck me. Also, your sincerity. You can tell you're not a bullshitter. You know, you got no reason. Everything you've gone through is a lot of it's hard. There's no reason for you to bring this up other than for you to reconcile it with yourself, you know, to make sense of your life and your memories and everything like that.
And to
I've
have
done,
any listeners who might have had this experience, a similar experience, or just, you know, leaning into your heart and leaning into your own discernment of what's true for you. And this is taking me to two of the previous podcasts that we've done, Gregg. One with Bob Snow, Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic. It would be a great one to link here, because that police detective worked so hard to disprove reincarnation and instead ended up proving it. And this is also taking me back to our episode on past life pilgrimages.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've been somewhere before, but
Right.
just are trying to understand how you know those details, like you said, what it feels like to walk on those rocks or walk on that sand, or where the best food is, or how to navigate.
Or just our last one with Sharon Kumara, who, you know, she had a near-death experience, leaves her body, has an interaction with Jesus, and then he takes her to a water world
Water planet.
where she is this mer person. And, you know, what blew my mind was I asked her, I said, well, was that a past life? She says, no, it's happening now. It's a parallel
It's
life.
parallel.
So she's living on another planet while she's living here. So, I mean, all
She
these things are
also
possible.
remembered Jesus, Yeshua, walking in from the great central sun.
Right.
Because there is a lot of correlation between Yeshua and galactic activity. So I think that is part of our bridge between these two different camps, or two different worlds. And I, like many people, and I know we're not going to have that conversation in detail, but I'll just say it in a sentence. I'm what's called a balanced hybrid. And I recall many lives on other worlds and in other galaxies. Gregg, that's how I recognized you when we first met via Facebook. I'm like, I know him, and I know it's from another planet.
Right.
But also many lives on Earth. So there really is no division. You know, we are them, they are us. It's just becoming the literal, we are one, with this consciousness raising. So Tony, I'm so sorry for the things that were very difficult for you. can you tell us, now that you're an adult, wonderful, high functioning man, like how you integrated some of it?
Hmm. Um,
You
well,
may
it's
still be
ongoing.
integrating it.
It's ongoing. I'm not perfect.
Oh,
So that's the first thing I'll say is, it's one thing to be on a show like this and be articulate and have my most best manners on, but I'm still not a perfect person. I still wear a lot of damage. I have a lot of emotional
right,
problems that
right.
I think the thing is, when you have an emotional problem internally, you just think everybody does,
Mhm.
right? You think it's everybody. So if I get mad at my pet peeve, I think everybody gets mad at it, but that's not always the case. So you have your own things. Definitely not a perfect person. I would never claim to be. And I was
None of
left
us
with,
are.
yeah, well, I was left with really devastating emotional problems as far as relationships go, because I was lonely for a long. I was one during that time. So first, before we go into that, I just want to say this: that on the reincarnation part of it, a lot of people say, "Well, that was a past life you're remembering on Mars." Well, the thing is, when I was in Seattle, I looked the same in the mirror as I do, and it was during the time it was from 85 to 86, 84 to 86. I was in Seattle, and I had access to the television and the radio, and it was the same songs and everything. It was the same time. But then I had the lineage, but then when I woke up the next day, April 16th in 1982, it was continuous of that experience. So, like I changed, like it was like I experienced those years and then went back. It changed me. It wasn't that I didn't have an instance where I was remembering a past life. I may have had those things before past life memories that have bled through. And I honestly, a lot of that is my second book, Project Star Maker, which was based on a lot of the stuff that you can't prove, spiritual things that you feel during experiencing this that you can't prove. So, and I had conversations with people. They said, "Why don't you tell this in your interviews?" I'm like, because it's so hard to get. It's just so vague and such a big blanket of stuff. And so I got talked into. Jackie Kenner talked me into writing Project Star Maker for that reason. Okay, but integrating. So what I went through, I was, basically slave labor for an organization of the military that was working like you said, with these other extraterrestrials, the tall whites. They're all a big organization, and it's about labor. It's about manpower, which is a very valuable thing. When you think about somebody's manpower for 20 years, what is the dollar amount on that? And they get it for pennies on the dollar, if that tenth, thousandth of a penny on a dollar. Um, but during that time, I was badly abused. I was kept with other people that were in the same situation I was, so we treated each other bad. I was not allowed. I lived as a slave, so I didn't have control over things. Who I would interact with, what I would eat, what I would wear. I didn't have those. I didn't have those decisions to make, and so as a result, I grew up making those decisions poorly in my life because I brought those habits back with me. I brought back eating problems, eating disorders with me. I brought back sexual disorder problems with me, um, emotional disorders, PTSD, claustrophobia. All these things happened in one day. I was, on April 15th, I was a cocky, arrogant, brilliant kid. And on April 16th, I was a broken, quiet kid. And, like that's the reality of what happened. And so I still struggle with a lot of the things that I experienced. And and I'm not whatever, I'm not complaining about it. I'm very what, right now it turned out okay. So it turned out okay. So I'm living in a really good place right now. After having my memories back, the claustrophobia, for instance, when I got the memory recall, I was able to think about what caused me to be afraid of small places. And I went, oh, well, that's it. I didn't know the cause of it. I just had the fear. And when I got my memories back, I went, oh, it was just that. It's not that big of a deal. I think it was just that. And so after the memories, I was able to heal a lot, like you said, integrate. And over time, and during that time, so from 82 till 2002-ish, there's a gray area there. It's more like 2000. It's a long story. But I was a very, very, very angry person. I was introverted, quiet. I had emotional, I couldn't keep a girlfriend for the life of me because I was just emotionally dust. You know what I mean? Like emotionally, it was terrible. After that 2000, I woke up one day and I was a completely different person. So it was as if there were two of me and we were both mentally less. And then at the end of the 20 years, the other one ceased to exist. And I got my mentality back. Within 6 months, I met my wife and stayed married for 23 years. So my
20 and
emotional stuff,
back. That's going right back to what you said of 20 and back.
Yeah,
that's right.
So during that period of time, you almost had two consciousnesses that were not, they were half of what you really are.
Starting off the same battery.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Yeah.
There were two of me at the same parallel time. Like I could have met myself. So it's a clone. I believe that it's cloning
Yeah.
is the secret behind it. They clone you and they move some of your consciousness into the clone. So there's two of you.
Right.
Then they only do it for 20 years because the original one can get damaged at that point. So they stop at 20 years and put you back.
Right.
And you just wake up the next day. But I experienced that clone 20 years first, and then my regular life of the 20 years. But at the end of it, and I see this is a very real phenomenon. So it's also, like you said, Wendy, for people that may feel like they see my interview and they feel like so I've been contacted by well over 2,500 people in the last 8 years that I've worked with one-on-one that said they've seen a show like this and they go, oh God, that happened to me. And they email me. And in the beginning, I did hundreds and hundreds of them for free, just phone calls and Zoom calls and emails. And I worked with this. And after a while, there were times when I got to a point where I was doing shows. There were times when it was 5, 6 a day. And I just couldn't do it. So Jackie Kenner, who's my book editor, brilliant girl, she's a business coach. She goes, charge. And it was $100. And those I was doing 2, 3 a day, 3 times a week, 4 times a week for years. And then now I've raised it to 300 because I just don't have time for it anymore. And they're still coming. And and these people are wanting to process their own damage. And so they're desperate for a lifeline. They're like, please talk to me. And I'm like, look, I don't have time today. And they get upset. And so like, I really had to step away from it. Like I said, I raised the price to keep people away. I would do it for free. I'm not about the money. This isn't a business of mine.
Right.
But what I'm saying is it's common.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that have the memory bleed through the way that I did without the memory recall event. Maybe an MRI scan was the thing. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yes,
But
tell us what the MRI scan showed. Was there something unusual or surprising or that made the penny drop for you?
no,
It was
I think that the
very
magnetic field just defeats a certain type of the technology.
Okay.
They put something in there that keeps apart areas of the brain. So from what I remember of the brain, the erasing process, it was not one pill. It wasn't one treatment where they hypnotize you or give you a pill and then boom, your memories go. It was several stations. Like they worked on each area of the brain had a different method that they were using to erase faces and names, and then sounds and sights, and then emotions, and then memory. Like they had different stations that were like industrial strength hypnosis in conjunction with drugs. I was getting shots, and they were working on stimulated parts of the brain to erase your memory. And that's so I think the MRI defeats some of the, it negates whatever they do on some level.
right.
Anyhow.
What are some of the commonalities that people, the 2,500 people and you, what would you say for people watching? What are some common threads that a lot of people remember with the bleed through memories?
Well, the time frame is what is, so it's rare. It's true. It's true that some people have a pleasant experience of contact, and they contact me and it was a pleasant experience, but it's very, very rare. Most people are taken into and so what I'm really speaking to is possibly a pie slice of the whole part of contact. So somebody that's contacted by an angelic being or an angel, they really don't need to sort out what happened. Right. So they were blessed. So they don't need counseling for this.
Right.
So the people that come to me are the ones that are kind of more through a military program.
Right.
And that's the first thing I ask: mom, dad, aunt, uncle, neighbor, sister in the military. And overwhelmingly, upwards of 70 to 80% of them had dad or grandpa in the Navy or the Air Force. So overwhelmingly. Sometimes they live near an army base, and mom worked at the commissary for a summer and then they got abducted. Sometimes they had a relative, they move around, but there's usually a military common denominator. So once you're on the radar genetically, it's genetics. So not everybody has the genetics to participate. So but then the thing that I work on, I'll tell you, I'll give it all out because like I said, it's not my business model. The thing that stands out is the intake. So at every abduction where somebody's going into one of these programs, these augmented programs where it's a time travel and they go back, there's an intake event and there's an exit event. And what I look for is the personality change. So so like I said, I set the record in my school. I'm bragging, right? Nobody likes a bragger, but I set the record in SATs in the early years. Like I said, I had really high SAT scores. So before it happened to me, I was an outstanding student. That was what I hung my hat. I had a sister and 3 older brothers, and I tested with the IQ. So I wanted to step on the gas and set myself apart because my one brother was super athlete. My other brother was a hard worker, had money. My other brother was going to school for a college. And so I wanted to identify as the smart kid. So I really worked at it. When I was taken, after they put me back, I had no ambition in school whatsoever. I went to a D's and E's and eventually dropped out of high school. So I lost all of the ambition. So I had a personality change. On a day, it turned on a dime. It was in one day. It was an overnight, literally. And my dad even said, man, I don't even know you anymore. I want my son back. He said this weeks later. I want my son back. What happened? And because I changed. 20 years later, I woke up one day in my bed and I went, it's over. It's over. And I literally was like, it's over. I was totally changed. And like I said, within 6 months, I found a girl and got married. I was emotionally stable. I went out, I started cleaning, I said, I can't believe I'm driving this car. Ew. And I listed it for sale. I got rid of I had a van. I was working and I cleaned my room. I said, I can't live like this. And my entire life changed. So that's what I look for in the people that I talk to and it's overwhelmingly, I did it live on camera last week to the host. And he said, well, I too have had experiences like yours. And I said, well, when was the first one? And he said, well, whatever, 1995. And so I always write it down. I go, okay, so whatever, November of 95. Great. So, and then we go 05, so 15. And I go, well, tell me what happened in November of 2015. And he went, nothing. He goes, and they all do this. They all do this. And I do this to all of them. And they all go, nothing happened. And they go, how did you know that? They go, wait a minute. How did you know that? There was an orb and there was a thing. And then I changed. That's when I got a divorce and I went back to college. I go, tell me about personality changes. I quit smoking. I was drinking. I was substance abuse. I just quit on that time, 20-year mark, exactly 20 years later. They go, I quit. And I left. I was in an abusive relationship and I drove across the country and and went back to school and I got my master's. How did you know? And it's over and over and over and over again. Most of them are unaware of when the intake happened. And so I sort that out. Like, tell me when you were born, where were you born? When did you move? When did it start? And well, I think I was 4 or 5. Okay, well, when was the one that stands out? And I sort that out. And the other thing so that's the 20-year one. There are other ones that I look at every 5 years or every 10 years. When was the next one? I said, well, I don't know. How old was he? And I built it into a timeline. And I go, okay, so this one looks like you were taken. This looks like the first one. And then your next one was 5 years. Did you know the next one was exactly 5 years after that? They're cyclical. So contact, it becomes cyclical because the beings can travel time. It's one work night for them. They can take you and put their little thingy in your genetics and then put you back. And then they can go 5 years into the future that night, bring you to where they're at in their laboratory and see how the thingy did, and then adjust it and put you back, and then go 5 years again and bring you back. So for them, they're just working their day shift.
Wow.
And they're popping into your life every 5 years or every 3.5 years or whatever it is. So I look for those cycles of contact because that's also held true hundreds of times when you start to analyze. People always pay attention to the details. They never pay attention to when it happened. And I found that that's the most telling thing between somebody, and some people don't. And to be honest, many don't have any kind of cycle show up in their contact. A lot of them don't, but far more than half do.
Listen, so the undercurrent in all this is there's this technology out there, time travel, cloning, off-world vehicles, bases on Mars and other planets where, 250,000 people are living and running businesses and, living lives and stuff. And this is mind-blowing to a lot of people listening or watching. What's your take on all this? And do you think any of this is going to make it into the mainstream, any of these technologies?
It already has. Look at us now.
True. Yeah.
So 100 years ago, we were not Zoom calling. We were
right. Yeah.
This would have been a long time on the Pony Express to have this conversation.
I like to look at the movie 2001. A lot of this was, projected way back when that came out in the 60s. Things like this were in 2001. Only you had to go to like a phone booth to have a video call with somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, they saw it coming. Like the AI stuff that they see now. We're gonna have robots.
Yeah.
Technology is a natural progression, but it really exploded in the last 100 years. So
Right.
at the same time that we have the timeline of the space program, about 90 years. So, the first breakaway, they talk the Maria Orsic story of her having contact and channeling the blueprints to a spaceship, to an anti-gravity engine that let them.
She was Scandinavian or German. This was
German,
back in the 20s or 30s, right? 1920s.
20s.
Yeah.
In the 20s, she was part of a group of girls that were practicing psychic abilities, and they did the ghost writing. They channeled and they wrote. And
the Vril Society, right?
Vril Society. And she the story is that her dad was in the military and had lunch with a professor at the University of Munich, or maybe University of Munich, if I'm saying that right. One of the German universities. And he said, my daughter does this. They accepted it. So psychic ability is very frowned upon nowadays, right? By the mainstream, by the forces that be. It's not real.
And the
So
scientific.
I do a remote viewing group, and we do it every single week. We beat the probability of hitting the target every single week. It's not magic. It's not magic. It's a state of mind that you work on. It's a protocol. But she had wrote stacks and stacks of paper, and it was all in scribbles. They didn't know, and the professor that her dad had lunch with was the professor of language at the university, and he said, let me see some of them. And he brought her some the following time they had lunch a month later, and he analyzed it. It was ancient Sumerian, and he translated it, and there was blueprints on how to build a spaceship. They gave them over to the government. They built one for her, one for him, whatever. It's all lore. This is lore. I don't know if it's true or not, to be honest. But if you look at what happened at the world after that, so World War I would have been about money, and World War II would have been about interstellar flight, because all of a sudden they were emboldened and they had this huge leap in technology. Germany did. They had a huge leap in engineering technology overnight. They had rocketry. They had their tanks were engineered just amazingly different. Everything, and it didn't last long. The advantage didn't last long, but World War II broke out, and then we had the Admiral Byrd, the Operation High Jump. They fled to Antarctica. These are all things that are confirmable. And then it ties in with what I remember from Ceres Colony Corp. Ceres Colony was an older colony. It had signs of where there was rust, peeling paint here and there, and it was modeled after European cities. These are huge caverns inside the Ceres planetoid that had streets, and they were modeled after European cities. So there were replica European cities on the inside with lights and all that, artificial gravity. And so there's just people that made contact with advanced civilization. So if you're an Indian tribe or Indian's not the right word. If you're an Aboriginal tribe in the Amazon right now that is living quite well, the same way that you always have been, and one of you wanders off and goes out into the street and gets picked up in a car and sticks around and learns the language, you become part of this new society of high tech. What makes you believe that there's not another society with higher tech than what we are? We're not the apex of technology. We're definitely not. And, we're very wasteful. We don't get along. We're not teaching our kids right. The upbringing of humanity needs to be standardized. I hate to say it. I hate to sound like a conformist, but it's true. When we standardize the experience for children, we will have peace and violence will stop, all these things. It's childhood trauma that fuels the crimes in the world, right? The addiction, the violence, all of it, all of it. Even the leaders, even the crimes our leaders commit against us is because of how they were neglected as children. So once we standardize that experience, mankind will literally ascend into a different existence altogether. And these are things that we don't have yet. So we will. And when we talk about reaching species that have their children give their children a healthy existence, those first out of your world, if it's 100% healthy, you're not exposed to a bunch of stuff, you're not exposed to these things. Like imagine a society like that, and then us coming in contact. We are absolutely barbaric. If you look at our children, that's the pulse of a species, is its children. What is the experience of your learning experience growing up from 0 to 3, from 0 to 10, 0 to 21 or 18? Right. That experience is not standardized, and the trauma that results of those years individually is what our society is made of. And so when you take a society that has from 0 the same exact healthy experience the whole time for generations, these are people that are not broken. These are people that are healthy, like mentally healthy. So I'm talking on another tangent, but it's true. But that's the smoking gun. It's the silver bullet for everything. Right. It is literally the silver bullet for all of our woes. It's because we have individual trauma from our childhood, and we act as fools.
That hasn't been healed, that we haven't had the ability to heal. But I believe every day is an opportunity to do that. And it's just perhaps that's how we're meant to evolve, is to be healing that, like right. You integrated and healed and are continuing to integrate some very out there experiences, as have all of us, just whatever category they fall into.
What I'm saying about that is, I don't want to be doom and gloom like people are broken, right? So yes, healing is the challenge, and that's actually what we spend our energy on. Most of us are spending a great deal of our life recovering from the beginnings of our life. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's what I'm saying is that's the pulse of our society we're in right now. And sadly, when we look at school and the experience for children, it seems to be going down. The trend is downward. Mm-hmm. So it's not hopeful at the moment. So what I'm saying is this is the silver bullet. Standardizing the experience, the emotional, loving experience for children, standardizing that will rid society of so many negative things. And also look at the energy you waste healing. So you spend your whole life sorting out your problems, sorting out when you could be getting on with learning and sharing things and developing things. Creativity is the highest form of intelligence, and you're not creative when you're healing. So in the remote viewing process, for instance, there's a chart that says that if your social your social being, your mental being, all of it, your finances, you will not have a good remote viewing session if you're worrying about your bills that are late today. Right. If you're worrying about I hurt my back and I'm laying in bed, they're telling, don't even bother remote viewing, because your psyche is trained on that. You come out of your mind.
You have to have your vibration and frequency high enough to.
If you're healing, exactly, you're not cleaning your house if you're laying in bed healing. Right. And so, and I mean that, and that's not what I mean, right? So I'm saying, like, as we are growing up healing, some of us grow up very healthy, but we're in school with a bunch of broken kids, and that in turn traumatizes us, right? So some people have a wonderful home life, everything's perfect, but they're in a world that is damaged, and bad habits move faster than good habits do. And so what I'm saying is this is just like a blueprint for where these are other societies are out there that live like that have an emphasis on the growing up of their offspring. And it is the difference between all the violence we see, all the substance abuse we see, a lot of the things, the relationships that there's a way to do this. And that, like I said, that's the silver bullet. And when we talk about ascending in other advanced species, like that's the emphasis.
Tony, do you feel that there's any collective consciousness raising? Have you heard anything about the concept of a flash of light coming to help us move up as humankind? And do you have any belief? And it's fine if you don't. I completely respect that.
Well, there's evidence.
Raising or vibration?
Well, no, there's evidence of it. So we're at a difficult time where a lot of people are discovering the truth about consciousness, like not what you learned in school. So we're at the time where people are discovering their abilities, like you said, having past life memories. There are people that are very precognitive. They're having, people that are very intuitive, people that are telepathic. These are all happening. And you've always been told that that's hogwash. That's the mainstream boom pressing you down. But what's true is it's growing. So there's a friend of mine named Suzanne Spooner, studied directly under the wing of Dolores Cannon, who invented the quantum healing hypnosis technique,
Quantum
QHHT.
healing hypnotherapy, yes.
So hypnotherapy. Yeah. So 20 years ago, she said she was doing the technique back then, 20 plus years ago, or whenever that was, when they were in the early time of Dolores Cannon. She said that only people that had high intuitive ability, psychic ability or high intuitive ability would remember the session. So they would put people under, it'd be 3-4 hours of a hypnosis session. And at the end, they'd say, what do you remember? They recorded it. And they'd say, what do you remember? And they go, man, I don't remember. I remember you telling me this part. And there'd be hours of a gap that they had no memory of. However, people that were psychically inclined would remember the whole, I remember the whole thing.
Right, because you're more comfortable with integrating the various stages of consciousness. That was my first training for. I am a past life regressionist, so that was my first training, was with a Dolores Cannon student.
So nowadays they all remember. So
yes,
nowadays,
I
everybody
agree. I
remembers.
agree. There's some differences.
So what that is that means that if the process didn't change, but the people are reacting to the process differently, that means that across the board, mankind changed somehow. There was an evolution.
Exactly.
So that's what I mean. That's an evidence. That's a piece of evidence there. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No.
You do it more than me. And I refer to hypnosis. People come to me about what happened to them. They want their fragmented memories. And I always say, do the memory exercises first. Hypnosis is more like a surgery. Do the therapy first. Do the memory work, do the emotional work, and then if you feel compelled, get the hypnosis, right? Nowadays there are $200 courses for hypnosis, and there's so many people that do. I say it's like getting a tattoo. So you can get a jailhouse quality stick figure ugly tattoo, hypno session, or you can get somebody that's a brilliant artist that can write you a beautiful tattoo. And hypnosis is the same way. The hypnotherapist, the quality of hypnotherapists really matters. And some people are getting willy-nilly ones. They're getting terrible hypno sessions that are being the hypnotherapist is leading. So tell me about the spaceship, right? And so they're getting front loaded with all this stuff, and it's just terrible. Yeah, right. And it's just
do not lead the witness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it happens. You have people that are witnessing hypnotherapy at booths at conferences, and the hypnotherapist is leading them the whole time. As soon as they get under, they're like, tell me about what the aliens look like. Because they're using that conduit to answer their own questions.
Right.
So the quality of hypnotherapists matters. And I always tell people that I work with, they like, I'm going to get hypnotherapy. I'm like, well, I can recommend a couple, but you really need to do your research and make sure it's somebody that's trustworthy. Don't just pick one out of the blue and go get your tattoo.
Absolutely. You have to feel comfortable with one another, and you have to feel comfortable with that person's energy. And that's not true of just choosing a hypnotherapist. That's true of choosing to have an energy healing session with someone, or working with someone as your spiritual teacher, or whatever that might be. And you've just got to know in your heart does it feel right to you, and does it feel comfortable to you? And also not just their energy, but their voice for the hypnotherapist is really important, because if the voice sounds like, fingers on the blackboard to you, that's not going to be a good session. And just let it be, find someone else to work with.
That I would agree. So I would say this, with all my memories that I have of my where I wrote my books, my 3 books out of, I've never been hypnotized. I've never had a hypnotherapy. I've been offered it by some great, really good people, and I just don't feel the need for it. You'll get a hypno session. Suzanne told me you'll get one exactly when it's time. Your higher self will tell you to do it. But I've certainly worked with people that had a bad hypno session. And when I do their timeline and I go, well, that doesn't make sense. This must have happened.
Something disruptive.
This and this happened. They go, no, 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 I already know. And I go, how do you know that? And they go, well, my hypnotherapist told me I was hypnotized. And I go, well, what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
And there are people that
Know
are
your own truth. You've got to discern and know your own truth.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are just looking for the reinforcement of being special. So some people think something happened to them and they want the reinforcement of being special. And I worked with there are people that come up to me at conferences and go, I was a so-and-so super soldier in the Lumerian War out in Pleiades. And I go, oh, really? And I'm like, tell me about it. And I'll talk to them. And I go, well, what do you remember? Tell me your memories. And they go, I don't remember any of it.
Mhm.
I'm like, well, what are we talking about here? What do you mean?
Right.
Oh, someone told me. I got a session.
Yeah.
I bought a session and someone told me I was a super soldier.
Yeah.
And it's great to feel that, to entertain that.
So
Yeah.
we have to be careful with our ego involvement, is what I'm hearing, of just making sure that we're grounded.
Feeding your ego for $250.
Right. And not just the ego of you, the person who's the patient, but also the ego of the practitioner,
Right.
that pollutes the whole situation. Coming from a
Well,
heart-centered place is always the best way to go, and devoid of ego, that's always the best healing technique of whatever modality you're talking about.
I would have to agree. And you know what, doing what I've done. So since I thought when I spoke publicly that I was just going to speak once and go home. And then the email.
Nice try, Tony.
Yeah. And here I am 8 years later.
Right.
Right. So the other thing is speaking on stage when people come up and they're happy and afterwards. And I really struggle with it because I don't want to become the ego that I see in people that I don't like. There are people that are doing it only to feed their ego. And I started out just wanting, people need to know that you live in a jungle that goes beyond the sky, that the universe is a forest teeming with life. Right. So that's important. No matter what I went through, and that things that I went through, what I witnessed does happen, that we don't live in a kumbaya in a PG world. You know what I mean? Like we live in a forest, and you can come across a fuzzy koala, or you can come across something with fangs and claws. And so that's the reality that we live in. And so I just wanted the mission to get out there, but it really does feed your ego when everybody's nice to you, and it's a dangerous place to be, to indulge your ego to make your decisions. And so I'm always trying to kind of turn it down a notch, because you're right, coming from the heart it's also the core of remote viewing. Shutting off this part and listening to this part is the correct data that we get for the remote viewing session. Yeah. So when we're teaching that in the classes, like that's really where it comes from. It happens here a millisecond before here. And then this translates it to the wrong data, right? You see a triangle, and then this turns it into an ice cream cone, right? So it's the same way. It's your ego. You have to really let go of yourself and kind of not try to look for things that are going to feed you to be somebody better. You know what I mean? Like,
correct. And that's why you need to the best of our human ability, let go of expectations before having any sort of healing session or hypnotherapy session, because the more you can be in your heart and be grounded and just have the experience, that's what's going to be the most beneficial.
that's great.
I love
great advice.
I love the expression that the mind is a wonderful servant and a terrible master, because we're really meant to be operating from our hearts. But when we've had a lot of experiences that have evoked fear and anxiety, and we're worrying about the future too much, we're not in the present moment, then it's not, life isn't making sense.
It's like I need to hear that every day. Like that's just great advice, like the mind, because at a certain point, your mind has this job of logic that it gives you. It's got to make sense of things, and your heart doesn't care. It's just telling you, like, it's just pointing, go there, and it doesn't. Why? Just go.
True north.
Yeah, just get going. So, well, but why though? It's rainy, like, so that's the kind of, it's the same thing. For the audience, I want to explain the remote viewing thing is that the first program that I was in was a remote viewing research program. And in my book, Beyond Sight, I give all the paperwork. I found a paper trail, the funding and the program, and I explained what I remembered I'd gone through. So what happened was we started kicking around. I did some things I remembered years ago and started a group about it on Patreon. And it started getting good. We started doing remote viewing just for kicks, and we started getting good at it, and I started teaching it, and then went to Kirk physically and got even more memories. And I went, oh God, this is what I did. This is what I wanted. The first place I was taken, it was remote viewing. And
I saw those videos that you did at Kirk, and the look on your face is pretty priceless. Like it's clear recollection that you've been there. Yeah.
It was visceral. That was the exact building I woke up. So when the ETs took me, I woke up, I was in a laboratory, and they said, we're going to borrow your consciousness for 20 years. Verbatim, that's what they said. Put me on a table, gave me a surgery, and I woke up in Kirk in that very place that was in that video. I woke up in that very spot. So I eventually did return to the place I started the 20 years, the very moment that I was just in shock. It was 3 days before I really got my wits about me. I was in a very bad way, and this is years after I'd already been speaking about it publicly. But the remote viewing, I started doing it and teaching, and I thought, this is great. It's so much fun. We have a target in an envelope that's just got numbers on it, and then they go through the protocol and start whittling away little bits of data, and we sort out remote viewing, and they remote view it. And so we all get together and share it on Zoom. I show them, everybody, the whole group sees what you got. And then at the end, I open the envelope and we look at what the target is. And everybody's always blown away. It's always fun. Some people, you get off weeks. Like I said, your state of mind has to matter. If if your dog went to the vet and then you did a remote viewing that day, you're upset, you don't get the info. Your mind is in the way.
Right.
You know what I mean? So your life has to be balanced out. You have to have your health in order and everything.
Very good point.
But most of the time, so the score averages between a 12 and a 15 score, and 15 is better than 1 in 250,000 probability.
Wow.
So we do it every week. It's we've never actually went under 11. I think we got a 10.5 once, but then we tried to purposely block remote viewing to do countermeasures, and we got a 7. So the blocking worked.
Okay.
But most of the time we're up there right around the 13 to 15 mark. They are remote viewing every single week. And it's just a fun thing. You get to learn that voice, your heart voice, Wendy. Like, it's the same thing. Psychic ability, what do you call it? Medium stuff, precognition, meditation. It's all the same. It's the same.
Just different terms.
Yeah, it's like you have eyes, you have ears, you can feel temperature, you have your intuition, your heart. It's a sense that everybody has. So we're building remote viewing is an exercise that has confirmation that when we open the envelope, and you get to know what was the correct voice that you were hearing. Was that my heart or was that my mind? And you get to know which one was correct. And overdoing it to a week for 6 months or a year, you do all these targets, you get to really understand what the heart sounds like. Your intuition, what it sounds like, and it's a great exercise. So that's kind of what I do nowadays.
It's amazing because it sounds like what you're doing is similar to, I've been doing this for a couple of years now as an online group healing circle. We meet via Zoom, but it's more or less a channeling session. And we start getting this random information, like one year we got the words, Excelsior ad infinitum, Latin, like what that, it just means onward. And upward forever, into infinity, upward to infinity. I'm like, what's that?
Oh,
Where did that come from? Or, people are in other groups from Paul Selig and Barbara Marciniak, and the channel information starts coming through, and I'll start saying some things that I don't ordinarily think about. And then the people in the group will say, I was just in a group 2 days ago and Paul Selig said this, and it's exactly what you said. So there's like a common theme that seems to be collective consciousness is starting to wake up to some ideas. So it sounds similar to what you're doing, but slightly different. But I love it that so we don't need to get into my story, but I had a traumatic story not related to government programs, but I had a spiritual awakening at the end of it, and like you, help other people who've been through that particular experience, Lyme disease. And I'm running a group of people who are trying to make sense of their experiences and are trying to tap into universal mind, universal consciousness, whatever it is. And you're doing something very similar. I think it's amazing. I know there's other people like us doing these kinds of things where we turn the trauma into something positive, and then we try to help other people, and then we try to raise that even up. It's not just about, because it started off as a healing thing for me, and then healing, help other people heal. Now it's going up into something else, raising the planet, consciousness raising, whatever.
it spreads, and so we are in certain, even when you look at it scientifically, and in a lot of the old CIA documents that I study about my account, we function like one organism. So, the subconscious mind functions more like one organism between us all than individually, just worrying about our 3D needs.
Right.
And so that's really neat when you get in touch with that. Like I said, it's the science is there. There's a lot of science that supports it all. But the sense of what you're doing, the intuition, like the tuning in, is just the same as eyeballs or ears. It's just another sense.
Right.
It's the meditation is the key, right? Opening up with a good meditation or a blank mind meditation or a mantra is the foundation for it all, to shut off your mind, to make your mind not be the master,
Right.
and listen and have nothing. That's really the first opening move on all of them. When you get even tarot card readers, they're doing psychic readings, they're meditating for a long time before they begin and silencing their mind. And psychic mediums do it. People that are doing telekinesis, telepathy, the military grade stuff, the remote viewing, all of it. It's under the same phenomenon, the same ability that we all have.
Right.
And we all have it. So if people have come in the group that said, Tony, I'll never remote view. I drink 3 brandies a night. I smoke cigarettes. I don't sleep right. I'm not healthy. I'll never remote view on your thing. And I'm like, well, just try it. They said, what I want to watch, I like supporting you, so I'm gonna be a member. And I said, well, do the meditations and try it. And inside a month, they're hitting the target. They're drawing the pictures of the target, so we all can do it. And it's just an idea, like you said, of Wendy, you said it so good, of not letting your logical mind be the master. There's a time when you should. Your ego, there's a time when it's great to be ego. There's a time when it's good to let your mind work, like when you're doing your stuff.
Right.
But being able to shut it off is also very important. And most people never give that a chance.
Right.
So,
To hear that whisper of our soul, to be able to hear our intuition. And there is the wonderful studies about the coherence of the heart with the brain and with the gut, because there's that gut wisdom too. Because a lot of people say, well, I could just feel it. I could feel it in my gut. I could feel like, oh yes, the excitement, or the clench of like, oh no, not for me.
Right. Our 3 brains, mind, heart,
right.
and gut. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Listen, Tony, we're way past our time. We would love to have you back some point and talk about
There's a lot to cover. Like I feel like I should be interviewing you guys at some point.
Well, whatever. We'll figure something out. Love you, man. You're phenomenal. Tell people how to get in touch with you.
So TonyRodrigues.com, if you can see my name tag down there, just no space between the name, TonyRodrigues.com. I'm having a conference in October in Sedona. It's called Odyssey Sedona. And I've got people from Farsight coming. I've got Jackie Kenner, my editor, and other people that are locals. And we're covering the same stuff. It just tells a story. And we're going to have remote viewing information. We'll tell how to remote view and how to meditate and just how to get in touch. Same thing that we're talking about here, how to get in touch with that part of yourself, You know, it's yourself, how to shut your mind off and kind of use that intuitive ability, and just to not be a stranger to it. Really, that's a big deal. So it's about transformation, and a lot of people in Sedona get it, and I want people to come here. It's a beautiful place. So it's a day and a half conference, and we have it lined up, so I'm doing that. But all my books are accessible. You can email me. You can access the Patreon if you want to do the remote viewing, and contact, and then there are links to other interviews that I've done that tell my story, but all 3 books are there as well. So TonyRodrigues.com is where I'm at. And then I do a lot on Facebook. That's always been my predominant social media is Facebook, but I'm branching off into the others. Just, I wasn't doing this for a living. I really didn't want to do that, but now I do. So you gotta keep up with it all.
You
Right.
got the call.
I got called for it. It's true.
You answered. That's great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Greg, is there a PowerPoint to bring back up to summarize for today?
There is. Just give me 1 second here so we can.
So thank you again, Tony. We just so appreciate your
It's my pleasure.
in sharing these things that are unique and different to a lot of people, and just really, really need to be shared. So thank you for that. So you can check out my fall events on my website, which is wendyrosewilliams.com. And I'll just summarize it that way, and you'll find my books there also. And thank you so much to our listeners for being here with open minds and open hearts. We so appreciate you. Please join us October 14th for the next Waking Up Spiritually podcast. You can join us in our Facebook group, which is also the same name, Waking Up Spiritually. Check out our website at wakingupspiritually.com, and you can either click directly on the broadcast tab there to find these podcasts, or you can search by topic of what you need help with and just put that in, guides, past lives, whatever it might be, energy healing, whatever it might be. And here's the link included to our YouTube channel where we are live now. And then these podcasts are turned into podcasts on the podcast apps and shared there. We so appreciate you liking and sharing from any of those locations, so other like-minded people can just get some help, just get some assist with the Waking Up Spiritually process. And visit Gregg at his website for his wonderful programs, energy healing sessions, fire circle, different things at Gregg, Gregg, Kirk, KIRK.com. And visit me on my website and learn how to work together privately or come in for a group session at wendyrosewilliams.com. So thank you so much, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.